So I have 5 different foundations. These are biblical, theological foundations for marriage. And I'm going to share them with you in a moment. I first need to begin by telling you something that I have told you, and maybe some of you have joined us a little more recently and don't know this about me. But I actually lost my first marriage. Shocking. When that happened to me, I thought I will never again be in ministry. How could I? Now, I don't want your imagination to run wild and do, all of these things. I went through this process to try to save my marriage for a couple of years under the leadership of my congregation, my Messianic synagogue where I attended. And it takes 2 to save a marriage. And unfortunately, that was not my case. And so whenever I counsel people whenever I do premarital counseling, the first thing that I talk about, the absolute first thing is you realize you can lose what you have. They usually come and full of dreams and everything is good. And even if there are some things that are not good, you're trying to hide those things under the rug and, give some excuses or some explanation. But the reality is that everyone is in danger of losing whatever wonderful it is that we may have, whether it is about to start or we've had it for a decade, 2 or 3. And the thing is that Scripture does teach about divorce. Now, this divorce is not a problem in Judaism. It is a problem in Christianity. And the reason is that Judaism knows the first half of the book better than Christianity does. So Christianity is more familiar with the second half of the book, right? Particularly when they asked Yeshua, can we divorce for any reason? And his answer is absolutely not. Only if you have suffered unfaithfulness. And even in those cases, there is a provision for you to forgive and restore. So it's not something automatic. But what's interesting is that it was never in question the teachings of the Torah regarding divorce they never came up as a question to Yeshua. Because in the book of Exodus, we find, and Mario, let's go to that scripture in Exodus. This is an extra scripture that, besides what I have on my notes. In Exodus chapter 21, actually, Exodus 21. Let's see, this thing doesn't want to cooperate. Exodus 21. Exodus 21 is after the 10 Commandments in chapter 20. And in 21, then, the Lord begins to reveal to Israel through Moses what is called the Mishpatim, the civil commandments. And it is through a series of situations. We can call it situational justice. This is how God's character applies in specific situations. And one of these situations is in verse 7. The case of, it says here in verse 7, if a man sells his daughter, Exodus 21:7, if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, you realize, we talked a little bit about this in our Torah study, ancient Near Eastern slavery is not the same as American slavery. Not the same. In the ancient time, you could, it was more, as a servant, and you could have property. Nobody was beating you up and berating you at every turn. And you can actually have a good life. And some people will choose to go into slavery on their own volition. It was perhaps the best situation for them. And in this case here, we see an Israelite steeped in debt, and he sells himself or sells his daughter as a slave. And it sounds pretty bad because the background that we have is American slavery. But we need to replace that with ancient Near Eastern practice. So what we have here is basically he is giving his daughter so that she can have a better life, marry perhaps the head of the family or one of his sons. So what we read here is that if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. This sounds bad too, right? She's not supposed to go free. Well, the reason is if she were to be free, then her dad is in debt. She has no one to protect her, no land. This is not a good situation. So it is the responsibility of the guy who receives her to provide for her, either to marry her or to have one of his sons marry her. Verse 8. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, though, who designated her for himself, in other words, he had plans to marry her, but then all of a sudden he changed his mind, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes to himself another woman, another wife, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. She is free to marry, to remarry. So basically, he married her, or her son married her, and failed to provide these three things. Again, in verse 10, her food, clothing, and conjugal rights. So provision of shelter and provision of sustenance. If he fails to provide these things, then she can bring up the case and receive a divorce so that she can then remarry. This is justice, because what he has done to her is put her in a position that is oppressive to her and is unfair to her. This is the heart of God, bringing restoration for someone who has suffered oppression in this way, has suffered at the hand of someone else who has decided not to be faithful to their oath. In fact, in Deuteronomy 24, the other passage in the Torah that speaks of divorce, it says, and Yeshua repeated this, it says that because of the hardness of heart, that's why Moses gave you the bill of divorce, the provision of the bill of divorce. It is because of the hardness of the heart. This hardening of the heart is what we see with Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh hardened his heart. He said no, a hard no to God that will not budge, will not work with, will not yield. That's the same situation. Marriage, when marriage fails, it is always because one or both hardened their heart and would not work at it, would not attempt to honor their commitment. Always. They may tell you it's about finances. They may tell you it's about unfaithfulness. But at the very heart of it is because of an unwillingness to yield, to work at it, to humble themselves, to deal with their hardened heart. Always. It's not a matter of one party being 100% wrong and the other one being 100% right. That's not what it is about. It is never that. I don't even think it's ever 90-10. But what it is always the case is that someone or both have hardened their heart and refuses to continue working at it. That's what's at stake. In those cases, then, Exodus 21 gives the provision for someone to not remain under that oppressive situation. And he gives them very practical premises: food, shelter, and conjugal rights. And since we're all adults here in this room, conjugal rights refers to sexual activity. So this is how I lead my premarital counseling, with the reality that you can lose what you have. And the truth is that it applies to married people, even more so. That a hardening of the heart in terms of the commitment and the relationship to the other person can very well lead to that. That's really my first foundation for a thriving marriage. Enter marriage with the fear of God. With the fear of God. Enter with the commitment that I am going to work at it. That I am going to be yielded, humble, and I will not harden my heart. But unfortunately, you have to have both people do that. And in many cases, perhaps in some of y'all's cases, that wasn't there. And some of you find yourselves without a spouse, as I did. And the Lord provided a wonderful, wonderful woman of God who was actually a young widow. And we met and we became friends. And then through our friendship, we realized that the Lord was bringing us together. And we have now been married for 12 years. And the Lord has done a fantastic job in not only in us, but in our families, in our children. So, foundations for marriage are a thing that we need to work at for the rest of our lives. There's no, we don't have Hal and Helen here who've been married for, 60 years close to, or something like that. They will tell you they are working at it, and they do work at it. And you can see their, tugging and pulling and their dynamics in their relationship and in their marriage. It's wonderful to see that. Hal and Helen there. Hal is one of our elders as well. All right, so having established that foundation that you can lose what you have, then let me tell you then the other 5 foundations that I have here in my notes. And don't worry, we'll go quickly through them, and deliver you on time or near on time to our lunch together. First one is that we need to trust without wavering in God's providence for how he brought the two of you together. Trust without wavering in God's providence for how he brought the two of you together. Why do I say this? Why do I put this at the very beginning? Well, because when trouble times come, that's one of the first things that we begin to doubt. Is this the real, was this the right person? Did I do right? Was that a right decision? Was that your will, God? Was that your perfect will? And some people who started their relationship with not a solid foundation, they are especially target of this. You know, it could be that they lived together before they got married. It could be that they were involved physically before they got married. And so they have issues that they haven't worked through, that when problems come, then they are an easy target for this thought that perhaps they didn't marry the right person. To counteract that, what I'm proposing is that we need to be firm, unwavering, without wavering, in the providence of God for the circumstances in which he brought us together. That needs to be a foundation, and I'm placing it first for a reason. Trust in God's providence for your story. You have a story of how God brought you together. You need to celebrate that story. You need to believe in that story. And if you are waiting for that person for the first time or for a new time, trust in God's providence, in his leading of you. Make sure that you consult with mature people who know you, to help you in that process to determine if it is really God bringing you together. And if that is determined by you, by the witness of the Lord in your heart, by those who love you, around you, who are wise and have experience, if all of this is in place, you have to seal that experience to minimize the access that the enemy would have to come and lie to you about the circumstances. How do you do that? How do you protect and seal the relationship, even if it started on faulty foundations? Well, that leads me to our second foundation, which is that we need to bring our past to a satisfactory resolution by receiving forgiveness and healing, and by granting forgiveness. We need to experience healing. And oftentimes, the healing implies receiving forgiveness and granting forgiveness. Let's take a look at Psalm 147:3. Psalm 147, verse 3. This verse speaks of healing, the healing that God brings about. Psalm 147, verse 3. It says, God, he heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. He heals the brokenhearted. God heals physically. When Yeshua was here on earth, he healed many people physically. But along with the physical healing is also the spiritual. Remember the man, the paralytic, they brought him through the roof. And what was the first thing he says? Your sins are forgiven. And the implication is for those who came and received physical healing, that the spiritual was there as well, because they were coming in faith that he was the Messiah, that he was at least a man of God with the authority of God to bring healing. Healing, then, is to bring to a satisfactory resolution the brokenheartedness, the brokenness that I have experienced. And I love this picture here of a broken heart. Literally, in the Hebrew, it says a heart that is broken, shattered. Well, the heart can be the seat of many things. It can be the seat of emotions, so we can have some broken emotions. It can be also a tendency that we develop. You know, I may develop a tendency of fear, to doubt, to be overly cautious because of some experiences that have happened to me. And for many of us, we go through decades without finding final resolution to what happened to us, maybe when we were children or young. Our heart was broken, and it affected us emotionally. It affected us volitionally. Some people experience, some people we would call lazy or apathetic. That can be the result of some brokenness, some emotional brokenness that has come to affect their will. They make their decision-making process is not whole. It's not healthy. They are brokenhearted. In many cases, they don't even know it. And for sure, they don't know what to do about it. How do you do that? How do you come to have a broken heart healed? It has to be through the Spirit of God. Through the Spirit of God, he needs to show you this process that takes place. When we suffer a trauma, when we suffer disappointment, even abuse, there is something worse than the actual occurrence, than the actual event that happened. And I know I'm saying a lot because someone may raise their hands and say, I was right. And are you telling me that there is something worse in what was done to me? Are you telling me there's something worse than that? How dare you? Well, let me help you. I'm not here to discount your experience, but I'm here to help, because here's the thing. The event that happened opened a door for a lie to come in that is victimizing you on an ongoing basis. You can have 20 years dealing with the lie that came in because of the trauma. So that the lie that you've been struggling with has actually become more powerful in your life than the event itself. And the proof that this lie is more powerful than the event is that when you get healed from it, you still retain the scar and the memory of it, but the power of it is gone. More powerful than the event is the lie that the enemy tells us as the result of the event. Wow. We need that insight. We need the revelation of that lie. I've actually experienced that in a few areas of my life. And I remember the first time I experienced that was about the fact that I was actually abandoned as a child. When I was born, my parents were not married. My mom was 18, and they fought like cats and dogs. And my two grandmas, they got together and they said, well, y'all can keep going, doing whatever you want to do, but the boys are going to stay here. By then, it was my brother and I. My brother's 2 years younger. The boys are going to stay here. And so we grew up we went to live with a different aunt, each one of us. And I remember the earliest memory I have, probably 6 years old, was being so aware that my aunt and her husband and my cousin, that they were not my real family. That this was not my real home. I knew who my parents were, and I knew it wasn't them. And even though they loved me and they cared for me, and I lacked nothing in material ways, I grew up with that sense that I don't belong. That's overwhelming for a child. That's your whole world. You have no idea what to do with that. And it wasn't until maybe 15 years ago, maybe a little less, that I went through a healing process like this, like what I'm describing to you. And when I asked the Lord to show me where was He when that happened to me, He gave me a visual. I love calling it visual, not vision. When you say vision, it's like, well, vision is for those people, No, He gave me a visual. And I saw myself as a baby sleeping in a crib in a very dark and cold room all by myself. That's exactly how I felt. Abandoned. And when I asked, where were you? Immediately the light came on. And the darkness became this beautiful blue, like ocean blue. And in a corner was a rocking chair. And He was sitting on the rocking chair. A warmth filled the room. And the child, myself, laying down there, I knew I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone. And what He spoke to me was, you are not an orphan. Now, I had never used those words about myself because I never was an orphan. I knew my parents were. And they would, we would see them occasionally. I never used that word about myself. But that's exactly what He was addressing. Even though you haven't spoken the word, that's how you see yourself. That's how you speak about yourself, as an orphan. And at that moment, that was healed. I'm not going to say that it was 100% healed, but I can tell you that the progress I made because of that revelation from the Lord was just amazing. It helped me tremendously. So we need the Lord to show us, to tell us, to reveal to us. What was the most foundational experience that I've had of a traumatic nature? And more importantly, what was the lie that the enemy whispered to me that I agreed with without even being conscious of it? What was that lie? What is that lie? What is the lie that has characterized my life? What is that lie? And once he shows you what that lie is, then the rest is easy. Because you know what? The power of the lie is that I believed it. It's a lie. It has no power in and of itself. It has power in me because I agreed with it. I believed it. Well, that's great news. Because to undo the power of that lie, now what I have to do is within my reach. I can actually do this. I can say, Lord, I renounce. I repent from believing that lie, and I renounce that lie in my life. Would you help me? Enter into a process in which I fight this lie and I break my agreement with it. I begin a process to break my agreement with that lie, whatever it is. Whatever it is. And these lies are so simple. In helping people break free from these lies, over and over I see these are very simple things. You know, like, I'm just stupid. I will always be alone. No one loves me. These are very, very, very foundational things, but they are so destructive. So destructive. You are dirty. You wanted it to happen. No. It's a lie that comes in and it makes everything foul and unclean. And I feel that way. I feel like I am the one that's unclean. But it's a lie. I am not unclean. The lie you told me, it's unclean. I break my agreement with that lie. And the moment I begin to walk that process, the power to bring a resolution begins to do what it does. Because the truth of God is more powerful than the lie of the enemy. So I begin to exchange the lie, and I begin to ask him, can you tell me what the truth is? And you know, when I asked that, and when I began to that process of receiving from the Lord my true identity, not as an orphan, but what am I then? I have discovered one of the most decisive things in terms of my identity in my life. You know, everybody says, well, you know, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, that's my identity. And that's great, that's true, that's great, but that's 101. You got to keep digging. You got to go a little deeper with that. What are you? I've discovered that, and when I act out of this piece of identity, the whole world is right. Everything aligns. And the part of this piece of my identity that he's shown me is that I am a father. I am a father. You know, I may come into a room where I don't know anybody, and I may feel lost, and I may feel awkward, and I may feel like, you know, I don't want to put the effort, I'm just going to go, because I'm an introvert. I am a maturing introvert. So because of my maturity, I can actually have conversations with people, and I can initiate, and I can do all this. But in the natural, I just want to, you know, walk away and be by myself. But when I remember I am a father, then my whole posture changes. Because now I am in that place to give. I'm not there to receive. I'm not there to why isn't anybody coming and introducing themselves to me? Don't they know I'm new here? All of these things. No, I'm here to give. I am a father. And I can interact with people, and sometimes that comes across as I am a brother. I am an older brother. I am a friend. But it's that foundational identity of that I know who I am that gives me the confidence that I can walk in any place and feel like I belong. There's a place for me here. And I don't need to take over. I don't need to make it about myself. That's not true freedom. That's not a healthy identity. That's control. That's a controlling spirit. But I can come in, and even in quietness, I can let the game come to me, so to speak. I can let the moment develop and come to happen. And by the end of the evening, I have people that I talk to, and I have relationships that I developed or created, and I go home, and I feel great. So I need to come to a place in my marriage where I am that person. And I can honestly say to you that is what Michelle and I have going on for us. That we are two people that have learned how God resolves our need for healing and freedom. We have learned how God resolves those things for us individually, so that when we come together, it's not about my needs or her needs. It's not about our brokenness. It's all fun. It's all about developing who we are. As you know, most of you know, we are both pursuing our PhDs. And we have so much fun. We are extremely busy. But I can tell you this, in 12 years of marriage, we have had 2 times in which we needed a little time out. Go on one side of the house and I go on the other side of the house. And 2 times. We didn't fight, we didn't raise our voice, nothing. I remember people saying, I know Pastor so-and-so, and he's never had a fight with his wife. And I was like, yeah, right. And now I'm living the dream. And the funny thing for us is that when we met, we became such good friends because we were not attracted to each other. That was so helpful. That helped us so much. Because we were able to develop a friendship and actually come to know each other. And as the time went by, I realized I have such a great admiration for this person. That has always been the foundation of our relationship from my end, that I have such a great admiration. That would prevent you from misinterpreting what somebody else does, what your spouse does. It drives away fear of their motives. Why are they doing this? pursuing this kind of healing helps you become the right person. And I have here my third foundation, my foundational truth is give to yourself and to your spouse the gift of you being a person who is complete in Messiah. Let me say it again. Give to yourself and to your spouse the gift of you. You are the gift. You being a person complete that lacks nothing in Messiah. You lack nothing. Therefore, when they don't provide what you think you need, you're not going to lash out at them. You're not going to fight. You're not going to react. You lack nothing. Do you want things? Of course. Do you have to have them now? No. I am complete. Sometimes a little scary, because I know she is fully capable of living a full life without me. Absolutely. But you know what that does to me? I just feel so relaxed. I have no pressure on me. I don't need to complete her. I don't need to live life for her. I don't need to make her decisions. Nothing. And she will tell you the same thing. When you come to be this person, that you are complete in Messiah, that you lack nothing, right? The Lord's my shepherd. I lack nothing. Even though I'm surrounded by enemies, I fear for my life. That's what he was saying, Psalm 23. I lack nothing. He is with me. I've got everything I need. I am a complete person. When you have two complete people coming together in marriage, that's a powerful force. Powerful. Give yourself the space to become that person. Give each other the space to become that person. And have nothing to do with a person, with a potential spouse, have nothing to do with someone that's not there. Maybe you can help them get there. But if they're a project, don't ever marry a project. Never. Never. Find a person who is well on their way of being whole, of lacking nothing in him. This is possible because a person who is complete in Messiah is a person who is all about life. All about life. All right, so you know this is where I bring in Leviticus, right? This is why I say, yeah, I haven't preached or teach about marriage, but I always do, because I'm always talking about spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, healing and freedom, and life. God is all about life. The fruit of the Spirit is the manifestation of life. 9 different ways. It's a cluster of grapes. It's one cluster of many components. And all of them are an aspect of life, whether it's love or faith, whether it's perseverance, whatever it is a manifestation of life. This is how I infuse you with life. Through the Spirit that dwells in me, I am going to speak life. Whether it is truth or bringing something to your attention, or I remember there was one issue, I don't know if you remember this, but there was one issue that I finally, it's something that I have been wanting to talk to her about. And I waited about 5 years. I knew it was something I wanted to mention to her, a preference of mine. And I never saw the right time until it was finally like, hey, you know this? Here's what I think. I was complete. I didn't have to talk about this. I hate it when people explode on you. I absolutely hate that. They don't have the discipline, they don't have the emotional maturity to hold it and to speak to you about X or Y when the time is right, when it is the appropriate time. No, they're going to, now that we're having this argument, well, here's what I think about that. Really? All right. But then, if you are on the receiving end of that, it is up to you, to be a complete person, that if someone does that to you, you're not going to lose it. And you're going to handle it in a mature and healthy kind of a way. In other words, you're going to give back life even when what is given to you is not. You are going to give back life. You can only be this person, come to this place of maturity and healing, when you are all about life. When what you give is life, is living, brings life, brings joy, it can bring correction in the right way. Because you yourself are receiving from the Father. You are receiving life. You don't receive condemnation. You understand when you hear condemnation in your heart and in your mind, you know it's not Him. And you know how to process that. You know how to deal with that. You know how to deal with the lies. So that the end result of what you receive is life. And you become this person. If you haven't been that person for so long, the Lord's not here to condemn you, to shame you. That's not Him. Maybe a voice, that may be an experience you've had with someone that demanded those things, that belittled, that brought shame. That's not Him. You know what He did when the prodigal son was walking and he saw him at a distance? He didn't sit there and say, well, I want to see him coming here. Let's see what he's going to say. Let's see if he's really going to apologize. He ran and embraced. He celebrated. Those are all positive, life-giving, welcoming, and receiving actions for someone who had failed miserably. So if you find yourself in that category, if you say, everything you're talking about, that's exactly who I'm not, you're in a great position. You're in the position You are the person that he runs to embrace. You see, lecturing, correcting will never accomplish what embracing does. When I embrace you and I bring you in, guess what? You're going to be transformed. You're going to become in the image of what I am giving, what I'm showing to you. It is more transformational than keeping you at a distance until you get your act together. So if you find yourself that person, run back to him. Meet him in the middle and receive what he has to give you so that you may become the person that your spouse needs, that your spouse needs today or your future spouse will need. Does that make sense?